Okay, got it. Yeah, so essentially what I'm going to be doing today is pretty high level. I took some random simple but kind of fun looking design, and the point is I'm going to try and take this design and turn it into code. Okay, so normally if you're working as a website developer, a designer will hand you some designs and you go ahead and just implement it, right? Or if you are just a developer and you have your own idea and you want to make it come to life, the question is like, how do you go about doing that? And yeah, so it's a high level kind of thing where we want to think about how we should think about writing this code. Because like I said earlier, there's a billion ways of solving any of these problems. And I actually haven't tried implementing this at all. And so the point is that you'll see sort of the mistakes that I might make when I go about this and how I can correct them. So this is a completely like fresh live coding thing. It's also aiming to be framework agnostic, which kind of just means like it doesn't matter what language that I'm working with. The main point is just the high level thinking that you would go about writing this code. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and create a brand new folder, and I'll just do it the GUI way so everyone can kind of follow through. Right, when you're writing your code, you usually want to put on one folder, and I'll just call this project like Panda or something. So this, anyways, let me look at this design really quick. So this is the design that I just looked at. I looked at it on Dribbble, which is a really good site for looking at inspirations and seeing other works from designers. This particular thing was designed by someone named Mohammed Reza Farzad. It's not my design, it's this guy's design. And it's really, really cool. And I'm just going to go ahead and try and implement it so you guys can see how someone would turn a design into code. And we'll see how far we can get. I haven't done a run through yet, so we'll figure it out. I only took a screenshot of a couple pages so we can see, we'll see how much we can get done. But essentially, I just took these screenshots and I just put it on here. And I'll go through essentially how I look at every single page. All right. But anyways, let's go ahead and just start with some actual code. My code editor of choice is VS Code. So I'm going to go ahead and open up Visual Studio Code. And you can download this online. But essentially, I'm going to go ahead and open up the folder I just created on my desktop. Hopefully I'm not leaking anything. Panda, this is what I called it. All right, I'm gonna go, oh, no, that's a screenshot. Boom, so it's an empty folder. So on the side, there's nothing here. I think this is a good theme. It has enough contrast so everyone can see. So there's nothing in there yet. I'm gonna go ahead and create a new file. Call it index.html. Hopefully this is just review for most people who are just getting started, but I can type an exclamation mark, enter, and VS Code will automatically create this boilerplate code using that exclamation mark, which is called an emit tag. And I'm going to go ahead and go to my extensions. And there's an extension that I like to use when I'm writing this web code in just pure HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So I'm not going to be using React or anything like that if you've heard of that. So this is extension. This is the extension called Live Server. It's called it's developed by someone called Ritwick Day. And what it does, I already have it installed, is that when I open up my index.html here, on the very bottom right of my screen, there is something that says Go Live. If I click on this, it will open up my website. And this is a live result, if you will. So what that means is whenever I change something in my code, I just save my code file, boom, it automatically gets updated. This is my new website, SDFSD. All right. So first thing that I want to change, probably just the tab here in the very top. It's called document. I don't want it to be document. I want to call it like Panda or something. So it's a little bit more fancy. And okay, so now we know that everything is working right. If I write code, boom, it automatically gets updated. So what is the first thing that we're going to do? Well, let's first look at this. So this is the website. It's pretty simple. It's I think I won't get into that part. That part looks a little bit more complicated. But essentially, you have like this page, and there's this navigation bar at the very top. It doesn't really change. There's some links on the bottom. This is a home page. There's an about page. And I just took the screenshots over here and I put them over here so we can just see. So this is the home page, right? Nothing fancy. It's just the links on the page and then some images and whatnot. And then there's when the user clicks on this about section, it's going to go to this about page, right? And this about page roughly follows the same theme, right? The links are all in the same location. These links are all in the same location. But the about page does have something that's really cool, and it's that when you scroll down, you know, the about page goes down, so you get to this part where you can see the bottom part of the page. But notice that these links are still in the same, right? These positions are a little bit fixed. So we're going to go on and try and implement these two things from the design. And well, what's the first thing that we're going to do? First thing I want to do is, well, I see there's like this general background. So I'm going to go figure out what this background color is. So this is the background color. And so how do we add a background color to our HTML? First, I'm going to add a CSS file. So that's going to be link rel equals to style sheets, and then type equals to text / CSS href. So this is just linking a CSS file. I'm just going to call it styles. That's CSS. And save this. And when I click on this, it's going to say, hey, this thing doesn't exist yet. Do you want to create this file? Yes, I want to create this file. So I have a brand new CSS file here. And let me look at my website. What did I want to do? I want to set the background color of the entire web page to that kind of off-white green looking thing, right? Because it's not white. So I copy that color, and I'm just going to do body background color. And what is the background color? Let me copy it again. So I use the color picker tool, click on this. Okay, I'm going to have to copy this manually. Or I'll just type it F2, F3EE. So it's F2, F3EE. Oops, F2. All right, so let's see what does this look like. Huh, you can barely you can barely tell the difference, but yeah, that's like a slightly greener version of it. It's a little bit off white, I think. Maybe I want to make it a little bit darker. I think it's fine. All right, so that's the first thing that I changed. Just to prove that this thing is working, I'm gonna go ahead and change this to something like really obvious. Yeah, okay, so the code is working. It's just that the color is just a really light shade of green. All right, so this is our off-white. We have the background down. What else do we want? All right, so the one thing that I noticed is that there's this nav bar, right? And here's the thing. When we write HTML, we have this nesting thing, right? So for example, if I have a button here and I have some text like this is inside, this is before, and then this is after, right? We have this nesting property where we say, okay, if this text, this content is between the opening and closing tags of this button, it'll go inside of the button, right? So when we look at our button, the text inside is inside of the button. What is before comes before, what is after comes after, right? And so using this, we kind of have to use this nesting sort of system to implement every single part of our design. And what I mean by that is that when we look at this, we should visualize all these boxes as like inside of each other. And I'll show you guys what this means really quick. So for example, when I look at this, right, I'm gonna move this thing over here. So I'm gonna get rid of the fill here. I'm gonna give this like a 2-pixel border, and let's just make this like purple or something. All right. So this is what I see here. Oops. Here is one of the components that I have, right? And then I have this component over here, and it's not going to be perfect. But that's another component that I have. Here's another component that I have. And here is the final component that let me go ahead and create another one. Here is the, get out of the pen tool. So that's another component that we have. And then the roadmap is another one, right? And here are all these separate objects. But what I noticed is that these all belong in the same line. And so what I'm visualizing here is this. And it's not going to be perfect, but I see that these are nested inside of this outer thing. Okay, and I'll show you what that means in code, because I kind of just drew boxes, but that's how we are going to write this website, right? So what do we have here? We have a logo here on the left called Panda, About, Sneak Peeks, and Roadmap. Okay, so we're going to have a divider here that'll just be the outside box, right? So what does this div represent? This div represents this outer box. And inside of this outer box is going to have 4 different elements. So the first one is going to be Panda. That's a logo. The next thing is going to be like a link. So it's going to be an A tag. And it's going to say about. And then there's 2 more. Sneak peeks and roadmap. So what does this look like in our website? It looks like this. And you can kind of see how this transforms into this. All that's different. So we have the base HTML down. The only thing that's different here is the styling, right? And so what we can do is we can first give this a class, and we'll just call this, I'll just call it like nav wrapper or something, because it's the navigation, or I like to use the word container. So let's just do that, nav container. And so I can target classes by using a dot. So nav / container. And just so we can see what this is, 1 pixel solid black. Boom. So we see that it kind of resembles this outside box, right? And inside of it are these other contents. So I can show you what that is. So I say nav container, all of the children inside of it will go all of these like a border of 1 pixel solid. We'll give it a different color, like red or something. And so you can see I now have these like inner objects that all rest as children of this outer container, right? Which is kind of this, which is what I just drew on top of this image here. And the only difference here is really just the spacing and the font. And also this thing is like a weird image. Usually if it's like text that is written in a really special way, you want to use an image for that. But okay, so one thing that I noticed is this thing is on the left, the other things are on the right. And so what I can use is something called Css Grid. And I'll show you what that looks like really quick. So I'm going to do display grid, and it's going to put everything in a grid structure. And I can show you what that grid looks like. If I click on inspect element and I click on this thing in the inspector, this will work in all the browsers, Chrome and Firefox. I'm just using Firefox here. And you'll see that, hey, this is our grid. But what is our grid? What should our grid look like? Our grid should look like 1 space 2 or 3, 4, 5. Okay. And the first one is going to be to the left. This thing is going to expand as large as possible, and the other things are going to be as small as possible. And I know that's a little bit confusing, but I'll show you how simple it is in code. We're going to do template columns. We're going to say the first one is auto, 1FR, auto, and then I'm going to say I'm going to add the spacer object here. So it's just going to be an empty div, which is just going to be the space. And immediately you'll see it's moving this part to the left, and it's creating a space object as large as possible. And then the other thing is going to be as small as possible, which is just the text, right? And I can actually zoom this out a little bit because right now it's at 300%. This is what the actual web page looks like on my laptop. So it's a little bit small. So we're gonna have to make this a little bit bigger later on. But yeah, okay, so let's go ahead and see. Well, another thing that I noticed is that this thing actually isn't as big as the entire website, right? So we want to take this box and move it a little bit smaller. And so the way we can do that is And this is like just a good way to learn CSS, is just to see other people just write CSS so you know what styles exist and what you can use. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say the width is equal to 80% of the view width. And so now you'll see that this box is now 80% as long as the width of the screen. Okay. So if I make the screen shorter, it'll responsively be short as well. And then what else do I want to do? Well, first thing I want to do is I want to get rid of the default margin around the body, so it's at the edge. What else do I want to do? Well, something that I noticed in all of these pages is that these links are fixed. They're fixed onto the website. And so there's something called position fixed that I can use. And I'll go ahead and do that. Position : fixed. And then I'm going to, but because the position is fixed, I can use these top and left attributes. So for example, I can say the left is going to be 10 view width, right? So now it's perfectly centered. And the reason why is because I set the width of this to be 80%, right? And if I set the left as 10%, the right will also be 10%. So it's perfectly centered. And then I can also do the same thing where I can just say the top is going to be like maybe 15% of the view height rather than the view width. And that's a little bit too much. All right, so we can move this back to 10. And then I can get rid of the grid. And you can see how this sort of resembles this page, right? Although it's a little bit uglier. One thing that I do notice is that there needs to be more spacing around these links, right? So how can we do that? We can add a column gap in CSS Grid, and we'll just set it to like 20 pixels or something. So now there's a 20 pixel gap between all of these things. And what else? Looks like the font should be a little bit bigger, right? So we can set the font size of everything here to be 2em. So one thing to note is that there's different units in CSS. Pixels is one of them, right? This is a set amount, which I believe is worth, I don't remember off the top of my head, but I think it's like 1/92th of an inch, something like that. So like 92 pixels is equal to an inch or something like that. So that's a fixed based off of the screen, right? So whether or not you're on a phone or on a big computer or a TV, 20 pixels will be the same length on all these devices. VH and VW is responsive, which means that this is going to be one VH is going to be different on every single screen, right? Because this is 1% of the viewport height, which is how tall your device is, right? So on a mobile device, one VH will be worth more than one VW because it's a vertical device. Whereas on desktop, it'll be a little bit different. So this is like something to notice, but these are like responsive units. These change with respect to the screen. Pixels are fixed, right? And then EM is something that's used only for fonts. They just scale with each other. And what that means is essentially, I don't want to get too much into it, but just know that EM and REM is just usually what you want to use for font size. It's just like a more readable and more accessible version. But anyways, now it looks a little bit more like the thing that we have here, right? And oops, let me go back here. So now we have this, and probably want a font actually. So what's a good font? What looks like a font that we would use here? We don't have to get the exact font. So I'm just going to show you really quickly how we can add fonts. I'm going to look for Google Fonts. And I can click on this Google Fonts link, and I can find any type of link or any type of font that I want. So what is it called? What do we name it? So there's an about page and a sneak peeks. All right, so let's just say sneak peeks. Okay, so it looks something like that. So where is the reasonably good Google font? We can just pick any random font. We don't want to spend too much time looking at fonts, although you are free to, because there are a ton of fonts. You just want something that looks normal. So it's sort of like a cute font. So probably something that would be sans serif. What's a good sans serif font? You know what? This looks pretty harmless. So I selected a link or a font here, and it shows up to the side. They're going to tell me, how do I use this? Well, there's this HTML code. You take all this HTML code, you copy it, you paste it in here. You take the CSS code. Oh wait, this is a different this is a different link. I'll have to add this one. So I have to add the regular one, copy this. I copy this link. This is the correct one. That was it. And I paste that into our head. I'm going to take this and I'm going to use this as a CSS rule wherever I want this font, right? So in this case, it's the nav container. Boom. I plug that into here. I go back into here and I removed one of my links. So I need to retype that. Actually, we can bring that over here. Deleted that one really quick. So now we're going to take this code again. We're going to copy it. We're going to paste it back in here. And bada bing, bada boom. Now we have a different font, right? It's a little bit cleaner. So this is how you would add fonts to your website. This is how you would add free fonts specifically from Google Fonts. There's another way of embedding fonts, but this is the easiest way, right? And you can just look at any of these free fonts on Google, type whatever you like, look at all of their fonts. They have so many. You pick one that you like and just embed it like that. All right, cool. It's not actually the same font that's used here. It's not even close, but you know, it looks better than the default one. So now we have this thing and it sort of resembles this. I guess one thing that I would want to change is maybe make this thing a little bit bold. So we can make this like all caps, and I'm just going to put this in a span here. So span, and there's going to be a dot nav container, and inside the nav container there exists a span object. And I'm just going to say this one is going to be a font size of even bigger, so 2EM or something like that. Oh, this is really fat, actually. Okay, I don't want it to be that big, but oh, it also seems like I wrote some bad code because this should be a closing span tag. There you go. All right, so now it's still this. Okay, I do 1.5. All right, so now it's a little bit bigger than the others. And okay, I think we got like sort of the top half down. Ideally, you would know exactly what font, because this font has something special where it, like the capital letters are really bold, and so you would want to make sure that that thing is accurate. But you have like the general space down. And the reason why I wanted to do position fixed is because let's say the body is scrollable. So I can have like some sort of text here. Let's just have a div here. And let's just say this is the content of my site. Right? And I go ahead and save this. And I go over here. And I say, let's give this a height of, say, 300 view height. And I think this should demonstrate really well. So, I should probably give this also like a padding top of 300 pixels or something. This is just for demo purposes. So you notice how when I scroll, right, this is the actual content of my website. When I'm scrolling, this nav bar is still here and it doesn't change. It doesn't move. This is what position fix does, right? So if you have like something that you want to stay on that screen at that location whenever you scroll, that's what this is for. And so you actually see us kind of use this thing here when they're scrolling, but the actual links and stuff don't move, right? That's good position, or that's a good case for using position fixed. And you would use the same thing on the bottom here. It wouldn't take too long. We can just, let me first get rid of me because I hard-coded making this thing a little bit big. So we can copy this, take this, put this on the bottom. We'll just call this like footer container or something, right? And what does it have? It has like this thing that says music on. There's a space object, and then there's 3 links, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. I'm gonna be right back. I'm gonna use the restroom really quick. Where were we? We were back at this link. So we have Instagram, we have Twitter, and we also have LinkedIn. We save this, and they should actually sort of. All right, so it's here, and that's because what do we need to do? We need to first create the footer container, right? So we're gonna put this here. What is the difference here? Well, this is on the bottom, so I can just change this to be like bottom 10 VH. Also need to change the name of this to footer container. And look, now we have sort of a same thing. Also, one thing that I did notice is that this text is much smaller. So we can also make this a lot smaller as well. All right, so now we have like the general part of the website, right? And actually it looks pretty close. I'm surprised that, like, considering how much code that we've written, this actually looks pretty close. All right, so now we have like sort of the general stuff. What do we want to do next? What's interesting? Okay, so I like this thing where when you hover over something, it kind of turns it green. And I'm gonna see if I can actually get this green color. I don't know if I can. Let's see. All right. Did I save it? No, I didn't. What did I say the color was? F4, F5EE. Okay. So what is that? Oh. F4, F5EE. All right, I'm gonna save that here. So what happens? This is when someone hovers over a link, right? So what is this? It's gonna be an A tag that's inside the footer container. So I'm gonna say whenever a footer container object, or specifically an A tag inside the footer container gets hovered. So on hover, we're going to set the text color. So we're going to set the color equal to that. Let's see what that looks like. So if I hover over this, okay. This is like a much darker grid. Let's just figure out what color this is. Oh, it's kind of ugly. Let's just try this color. Let's see what this color is. That's pretty close, actually. All right, let's just use this. And also, since these are links, we don't want this to hover to be like a text cursor. We want it to be a pointer cursor. So I'm going to go ahead and change that as well. The cursor is going to be pointer. Boom. So now it's a hand instead. All right. So now we have some like user interaction. I think it looks a little bit better now. One thing that I do want to change is I think this thing needs to have a little bit more space. I'm going to make this like 40 pixels instead. So the top part has a little bit more spacing between the words. And I think the background color should be a little bit greener. So I'm going to make it a little bit more greener here. Does this kind of hurt my eyes? Okay, this is too green. I'm going to make it a little bit lighter. So you can mess around with like just, I think a lot of people do end up spending a lot of time just messing around with like the colors, and that's perfectly fine. It's just whatever makes you happy, right? This makes me happy, to be honest. I like messing around with this. But also I wanted to change things up here. So I'm going to do the same thing. Footer.container. Okay, we're going to go here. We're going to target the nav container. Same thing, right? These things, when you hover over them, they should turn dark green. All right, cool. So now we actually have like most of this main website. This part is a little bit more complex. It's not like difficult. It's just a lot of extra work. But this is just basic text. And this is just an image. So you could just break this down into two parts. But one thing really quick, Julia, the Zoom will close in 4 minutes, right? So we do need to restart it in a bit.
Yes, basically, we can just rejoin it after it runs out.
Okay, sounds good. Well, it's just manual. It'll automatically kick us out, right? And we'll just rejoin when that happens.
Yes.
All right, that's good. All right. Anyways, so we're gonna go back to this. When we get kicked out, we'll just get kicked out. So this, the footer and the nav part, this is fixed. So it doesn't matter whatever content we have in here. This thing doesn't actually affect the positioning of anything else. So for example, if I type stuff here, it will just show up, right? It doesn't try to move around from anything. Everything that has position fixed is essentially removed from the natural flow of the website. Okay, and everything will go on top of it. So we can just put our content in here. What is it essentially? It is, I'm gonna just call this class equals to content. Okay, and the content here dot content will be we're going to use display grid again, and I'm going to say template columns 1FR 1FR because I believe this should be split in half down the middle. If I look at this, it's kind of almost split down. Maybe you can fudge around with the numbers and make this like a little bit less and this one a little bit more, but essentially that's the general gist of it. And I probably need like a transparent panda image. Who cares? We'll worry about that later. So essentially on the left hand side, we have what does it say? The Bear Collective. So the Bear, that's not how you spell bear. The Bear Collective. And so now we have the text here and it looks nothing like what we have. But we can use position fixed here if we want to. But what I'd rather do is just have, let's just say class equals to, this is just like the left panel or something, left panel. That would make sense. So the content has something called the, you know what, left panel is specific enough. So left panel, and how do I want to do this? Maybe I want to set the height of this to be 100 view height and the width of this to be 100 view width. And then I can say this thing is going to be display grid, and I can do something like place self center, and it'll be perfectly in the center of the left half. This is just a really quick and easy way to center things perfectly in the middle. But also, it's a little bit different because this is all in different text. So how can we do this? The easiest way is to probably just wrap everything in separate divs. And each one of these is styled a little bit differently. And this is the most difficult part. So this one is going to be like /div. And then one thing I noticed is that collect is like one style and then ctiv is another style, right? So we're going to split this down the middle with another thing. So span, I'm going to set this to a span. And I believe we have like 20 seconds left or something like that. So I'm just going to write some code, and then as soon as we get kicked out, we'll just reconvene. So collective. All right, and we're back. We're back. All right, cool. So so we still have this thing. It's really small compared to what this thing is. So let's see what color this is actually. This is like some sort of dark teal. So I want to get that color. What is it? 1F313B. So we're going to have color 1F. 313B. 313B. Save that. I go back to here. I'm pretty sure it is that color anyways. But one thing that I did notice is Well, first off, let's make the font size a little bit bigger. So font size is going to be like 3 EM or something. Oh, it's going to be way bigger. But actually, so the cool thing about this is that this kind of shows like all the stuff that you can do. These are 3 different lines of text, and they all have just different CSS styles applied to it. So one thing that I noticed is the div part is just the same thing with just the background. So let's see if we can get that. So left panel, there's a span. So the left panel span that I created there has a background color of this and a color of white. This is semi sort of left panel. Oh, it's not a direct child. It's actually just, there you go. All right. So now you see we kind of have that. I actually want to use this font family again. Actually, I can just put this on the body so that everything will have this font. And one thing that I did notice is that the font weight here is bold as well. But I don't think I have the bold one added. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I have Jakarta plus Jakarta Sans, which is where we're going to type it here, plus Jakarta Sans, this one. So earlier I added this regular, right? It says remove the style, but now I also want like a super bold one. Let's do an extra bold. I'm going to select this style. And the only thing that it did was it added like this and or at 400, 800. These are just the font weights, so you can set them by the numbers themselves, but or you can just type them with words. So I'm going to go back here. I'm going to update my font list. Okay. And so now I can set either the font weight to be 800, which is, you know, as thick as it goes, or I can just be lazy and just type bold. And I think it also makes more sense. So now this part is bold and the rest of it is not. Although that's not true. It should be this is bold, but the first line is not. And so there's another CSS selector that I can use, which is called left panel. I think nth child. And I think I want to select 1. So this is going to be the first child of left panel, which is this thing. This thing has no font weight, or it's actually thin, I think. But the second and the third one do. So these ones will be bold. And if I look at this, what am I missing here? Nth child. This is the nth child of left panel, right? So left panel, nth child. Is it 0, 1, 2? I don't want to worry about it. I'm just going to hard code it. I don't exactly know the syntax for that off the top of my head. So I'm just going to say this one is pair and this one is collective. So instead of this, I can just say dot bear is going to have a font weight of bold. And dot collective will also have a font weight of bold. And this is thin. And also, this thing has a font size of like, what, 2 EM larger. And this one, oops, this one is just 1.5. Oh, no, that's going to be huge. 1.5. So it's a little bit smaller, but it's larger than that. Then, what else? What else? I want to make this, it's not actually perfectly centered. It's a little bit lower. So what I can do is I can add a padding top, I believe. And I can add like just 20 view height padding top. And this should move it down a little. All right. So now we have this left-hand side, and the right-hand side, you just add an image of some sort. I don't have an image, but you can see how, let me make sure that I'm going to the correct pages. You can see how many lines of code that I've actually written. We've been writing code for about like what, 40 minutes. And we already have like the general outline of this web page, right? We even have like this fancy lettering, and it's all just basic CSS. It's very simple. It's only like a couple lines of code, right? This is only like 80 lines. Most of it is duplicated or new lines. And so actually, one more thing, if you guys are like really into CS, you'll notice that, hey, nav container and footer container are, they're very similar. They have most of the same thing. The only thing that differs is this top and bottom part. And so you can actually extract that into another thing. I wonder if I should actually just do, let's do that so we can see. So I'll just say this is like fixed container. And then we'll call this the nav and the footer. And it's going to have most of the same thing, except the one thing that changes is that this is bottom and nav is top. That's the only difference, right? So I can get rid of this. And what I can do is I can say this thing has a class name of nav and fixed container. And this one has a class of footer and fixed container. Right? And so it's still the same. But what you notice is that we've now extracted all of the common styles into a separate class. So this is like a slightly more efficient thing because you're not rewriting the same styles over and over again, right? So this is just like a small CS major thing. For demos, it's usually a lot faster if you just copy and paste code. But like whenever you're copying and pasting code, that should usually give you like a little bit of an indicator that there's a way of making this more efficient. All right, so now we have this thing. This is pretty close. I guess I can show some more CSS stuff that maybe is interesting. So for example, in the footer, you can do something like text transform, set everything to uppercase. Since I just realized everything here is uppercase and I don't want to retype it, you can change the casing of everything in CSS if you want. So that's one thing that you can do. The footer size is actually a little bit smaller, I think. It's like 0.8 or something. Oh, these things are now a little bit different. Should look like that. Footer container. Okay. All right, so now we still have the hovering thing. All right, so yeah, I mean, pretty simple, right? I think this is good enough. Just using CSS Grid, I think, is fairly intuitive enough, hopefully. So to use Grid, first thing you have to do is you have to set the display to be grid, and then you just divvy things up into columns and rows. So if you wanted to do rows as well, you can also do template rows, and it'll work a little bit differently. These can be all different sorts of measurements. Auto just means the smallest size possible. So in this case, it's just the length of the text. That's how big it is. And one FR will take up as much space as possible. So it ends up making the spacer part, responsive, and it takes up as much space as possible. And so if I make the screen size a little bit smaller, it follows. It roughly still looks the same, right? It's not a hard-coded value. So that's like a little bit of more responsive kind of thing. Okay. We can try and get, what would be a fun part to do? We can go ahead and try and get this next page. Okay, so there's another page. How do we do a different page? Create a new file here. I'll just call this the about.html because this is the about page. I'm gonna go back to the index.html. I'm gonna copy all this because I'm lazy. I'm gonna go ahead and paste this in here. And this link should still be the same. And also this thing should link to the about page. So how do I do this link? This about href equals to /about.html. Do I need the dot here? I'm going to add the dot just in case. So if someone clicks on the about, boom, the URL has now changed to about, but nobody knows that we're in the about page. So I'm going to change this about page really quick. I'm going to keep that. We're going to say, this is the about page. All right. So now, look, this is our home page, right? We click on the about, boom, we go to this is the about page. Pretty straightforward. This is the link, right? And what do we have in here? Actually, roughly the same thing. So this part you kind of know how to do already. This part you kind of also know how to do already, except there is now a bottom part. So let me add this, the bear alley. So what does it say? It says the bear alley, and then about the bear, is bear capitalized? Oh, T is capitalized as well. About the bear, and then collectibles project. So it's going to be collectibles project. We can get rid of. We'll keep that for now. It's reasonably close. And what else is here in this left panel? There's like a long paragraph. So what can we do with this paragraph? I don't want to type this entire thing. I'm just gonna lorem ipsum it. So we're gonna generate lorem ipsum is just like the generic text that you use for using placeholder text. I'm just gonna go ahead and paste that in here. And so now, oh my goodness, it's so fat. Quick change. We need to set the content here to be actually like 80 view width instead, and then we're gonna set the margin left of this to be 10 view width. Okay, and now this thing is a little bit small, so, or the text should be a little bit small. So I'm gonna say the left panel of p tags should have a smaller font size. So font size will be like 0.5 em, maybe this is too small. Okay, and what you'll notice is that we have once again fixed, right? This part is not fixed. Actually, this thing is really, really big. I can make it a little bit smaller, but I'll worry about this later. So this is the actual content of our or this is the index. This is the actual content of our website, right? Which has all of the title and also the description and stuff. And so when we scroll like a normal web page, it scrolls and moves up, right? However, because the nav bar and the footer here, these are both fixed. We did position fixed. They won't change with the scroll. Position fixed just means it's fixed relative to the screen, right? So for example, this one I said the footer is going to be, where's footer? Footer is right here. So I said the footer is going to be, first off, 10% from the left, 10% from the bottom. From the bottom of what? From the screen. So that's what this part is. This is 10% from the bottom. This is 10% from the left, right? And when I scroll, this thing changes. So this is like part of like the cool effect, I guess, that you have. But yeah, so what's the next part? The next part is, and you would also have an image on the right half. But here you have another part of the content. It's going to say created by many. Core team is born in LA. Oh, I live in LA. So we can go to our about page. And we can say, get rid of this left panel thing. This is now going to be like a centered panel. Div class equals to centered panel. And what does it say? It says created by many. Oh, that's not how you spell many. And then there's like a p tag here. And this is more like a header. So we can say h2. So in this p tag, I'm just going to copy this lorem ipsum text again. Paste. Boom. What does this look like? Looks like that. But what is the center panel going to do? Let's go ahead and style this, right? So we're going to go to CSS. We're going to add this wherever we want. Ideally somewhere that makes sense. Does this make sense? Who knows? We can paste that, and we're going to say text align center. Oh, it's centered, but it's still left paneled. And I believe that's because I set the content here to be grid and it's split into two. So I want a centered panel to take up both the left and the right. How do I do that? I can just do something like grid row 1 to 3, I think. Oh no, this is row. Grid column. I want grid column 1 to 3. And so now it's centered and it takes up both the left and the right columns, and boom, you have this. And there's also like a minimum width actually. So or a max width. So in our about.html, this p tag should not be too big. So we can set the center panel p tag. We can say there's a max width. All right, let's just set width equal to, no, I like max width. Let's do max width of, say, 250 pixels. That's maybe a little bit too small. Okay, and then also I want to center this. So this is going to be margin 0 auto. It's another way to center things. And we have the center. 250 was too small. So we can do like 450 or something. Okay, and then everything here is actually a little bit bigger. So we can set the font size equal to 2em again. And since we did that, we actually should make this thing a little bit bigger. And then we can also actually make this font size a little bit smaller as well. So font size is 0.8 em. And boom, so you have the first page, and now you have the second page. And you can add a little bit more spacing between the two. And then you have this card on the left, card on the right. And what does this look like? We can just do the 2 boxes. So inside of here, there's 2 boxes on the bottom, right? So we're going to say, first off, let's nest this again. So we're going to say, this is the first card, div, and here's the second card. So this is the first one, here's the second one, and they're all wrapped inside of this thing. And it's like a Twitter card, so I'll just call it like Twitter or something. So class equals to twtr. And I'm not going to spend too much time on actually implementing the specifics of that. So let's just say, like, give it a height of, I don't know, 400 pixels. Let's give it a background color of white, which is, I believe, what it is. Okay, so height 400 is a little bit too big, so we can do 200. And let's do like, okay, and let's just do a margin top. So there's a little bit of spacing between the card and the text above it. So now there's some space. Oh, I see. And then right. So that means this thing, we want to, by default, it'll take up as the most width, and it'll go row by row. We want it column by column because it's 2 columns. And so we can do the same thing with display grid again. So we're going to say this thing, we'll just call it like, I don't know, Twitter container. And we're just going to say dot Twitter container, give it a display of grid. And we're going to say same thing up here, essentially. Template columns, 1FR, 1FR. And then we're going to give it like a column gap of like 20 pixels. Maybe this should be a little bit bigger, like 400 pixels or something. Okay, so now you can kind of see how this emulates this, and then you would fill out even more nested CSS, and it's going to go inside and split things into half. Okay, but I think the fun part here is mostly just having like the interaction. So like when you hover over things, right, it sets the color. When you scroll, right, what changes? These things don't change. Bottom things change. Another thing that you might want to do for UI is make it so that this thing has a background color, so it actually overrides everything. Because right now, if you notice, if I scroll up, right, this thing kind of covers the text. And so you can do something like set the background color, which is right over here. We can take this background color and we can like put it on top of the nav or something. Right, so now notice how it kind of like hovers it, and then but it still shows up above it, right? So something that you would want to change is you probably want to make the nav bar take up the entire top half rather than isolating it on the bottom. And so like when you're writing code, you'll notice like, hey, I might want to change something up a little bit, even though just for a different feature or a different interaction or something. But now this way you'll have like a little bit, this looks a little bit awkward. So that's why you want this thing to take up the entire top half. So you just don't see it. But yeah, so now you can see like this is relatively simple. We got this done in like under an hour, and it pretty closely resembles what a really good designer has done in developing this thing. You have, links. Well, we have this one link. It goes from the home page to this. And also you have, position fixed, which is very common for like modern design. They have a lot of this fixed stuff going on. You also have, some user interaction notifiers. So like, for example, when you hover over links, it indicates that it can be clicked, right? And yeah, you have all these different styles. You have centering stuff, things from the left. You have this really cool, I think it's kind of interesting, sort of nested text where the styles just change in the middle of it. And technically later on, maybe we can make this stuff more interactive, actually have some music and whatnot. But I don't want to put too much on your plate. I think this might be a good place to end, unless Julia has anything that you want me to cover specifically. But yeah, this is like just a really quick basic of taking a design, how you break it down. You look at essentially boxes inside boxes, right? And so if you click on the inspect, you can actually see what boxes are what, right? And you'll notice that, hey, the way I wrote this code is pretty much exactly how I imagined it when I was first looking at it, right? And I was drawing the boxes. I said, this is a box, this is a box, this is a box. Okay. These boxes are all wrapped together in the same row. So they're going to be, part of this box. And these boxes are all part of the same thing. Everything that gets grouped together should get grouped in a box. And by, getting grouped in a box, essentially what I mean is wrapping it in a div, right? Like this, right? So for example, this entire thing wrapped in a div. All this stuff wrapped in a body, and being wrapped inside something just means that it's grouped together, right? So yeah, that's the basics of just turning something from design into code. I hope this was like fairly simple enough to follow along.